Hi, it's Irene Weinberg, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. Before we get started with the episode, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching so you never miss an episode. Every week, we share heartfelt stories, spiritual insights, and practical guidance to help you navigate grief and trauma, find hope, and discover rebirth after loss. By subscribing, you'll get access to every episode and join our supportive community on this journey. Thanks for being here, and let's dive in. Hi, everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to welcome Jason Lyle, a former pastor turned wilderness guide whose coaching practice called Sacred Grit helps men rebuild their lives from the inside out. Jason is also the founder of Adventures in Recovery, a nonprofit devoted to healing through nature and community. Jason's journey has taken him through infidelity, addiction, and the unraveling of everything he thought he was. When the structures of his life collapsed, Jason found himself drawn into the wilderness, both spiritually and quite literally, in the mountains, in the quiet, and in the raw honesty of being alone with himself. Jason began to piece together a new way of living. Instead of letting grief destroy him, Jason allowed it to become a sacred teacher, which makes his story an inspiring one of healing and rebirth. Through breathwork, meditation, cold water immersion, and time in nature, Jason discovered that what had fallen apart was not his life. It was everything false about it. And what emerged was a deeper, truer self and a calling to help others navigate their own dark nights of the soul. Today, Jason leads men's retreats, guides wilderness experiences, and teaches nervous system-based spiritual practices that help men process grief, rebuild faith, and reconnect with their purpose. His work bridges the spiritual and the practical, inviting men to face their pain with courage, regulate their nervous systems, and discover new meaning in their lives. And as the host of the Sacred Grit podcast, he creates space for honest conversations about healing, resilience, and the kind of transformation that shapes us into someone new. I'm looking forward to talking with Jason, who'll be speaking with me from
Dahlonega. Yeah, you got it. Yep.
Dahlonega,
Yeah.
Georgia, about what it was like to hit rock bottom in his life, how grief became his teacher, the truths Jason now lives by that once felt impossible to believe, the nervous system-based spiritual practices Jason uses to help men process grief, and more, for what is sure to be a fascinating and enlightening conversation with a truly interesting man. Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hey, Jason, a warm welcome.
Thank you, man. You made me sound great. I tell you, I need to get you to come on my podcast and just introduce me.
Well, it's important to me that everyone knows the depth of who you are.
Yeah, sure.
Because we're going to share you with everyone. And thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So let's start from the beginning, Jason.
Yeah.
What first led you into pastoral work? How old were you, by the way, when you got into pastoral work?
I was 33 when I got into it. But I can tell I was adopted. So I was put up for adoption at birth, and my parents got me when I was 2 weeks old. Kind of had to leave it to Beaver household. And my mom had, my mom's passed since. There's pictures somewhere of me at probably 5 years old, standing at her footstool, or I think we call them ottomans now. And I have a Bible laid open on the ottoman, and I have a little suit on, and I have one hand up in the air, and I'm slapping the Bible with the other, playing preacher. And so when I was 8 years old, I did what Southern Baptists call getting saved. And right after that, I read the Bible all the way through from cover to cover. My grandmother had given me a living Bible, which back in the 70s was kind of a big thing. And I read it cover to cover. So I've always had a lot of curiosity around spirituality. Got very interested in church. I taught Sunday school, I taught youth group. And then finally in 2004, I sold my plumbing company, started seminary, and started a church. And everybody called
It was a Baptist church.
well, kinda. Everybody called it the cowboy church. We met in a barn on Tuesday nights, and I'd run the horses out and bring the people in. And then after that, I'd run the people out and run the horses in. I really made the church for men because I recognized back then in 2004 that men just were not going to church. And so I wanted to create a space where they could. We did church on Tuesday nights. We did it in a barn. We played country music. We had a meal before service. And this allowed men to have a space to come because the men I was trying to reach, they worked 6 days a week. They didn't want to spend Sunday morning going to church. So we did it on Tuesday night. And then, the next thing would be, well, I got to get the kids fed. Well, we'll just do a meal before service. So we tried to remove all the excuses and create a church that felt really comfortable for men. And so that's really kind of how it came about. I tell
Can I
folks
tell you, it sounds like a very cool church.
it was a very cool
It sounds
church.
like a
Yeah.
very cool church.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a very special place. I'll still have people that were a part of that process send me emails now and talk about how special of a time of their life that was. It was a very special time. So that's how I got here. Yeah.
So that's how you got here. So what happened? How did your faith, marriage, and identity unravel, reshape your understanding of God and the human experience of suffering?
Whew, well, that's
That's a big transition, kiddo.
Well, there's another thing that followed me around alongside my spiritual path, and that was just sexual curiosity. And I grew up in the Baptist church, and so we didn't talk about sex. We just acted like it was used to make babies, and that was it. So I just kind of had a lot of shame around my sexuality, which came to be very early. I saw pornography the first time when I was 10 and
Wow.
was having all the things that young boys do at that age. And then youth group was, of course, teaching us. That was really when purity culture was just starting to take off. So, we had all these ideas about no sex before marriage and no, solo sex. I'll just say it that way. So all those things were, kind of putting a lot of shame around something I was very curious about, but felt like I couldn't really talk about, and I'm not blaming anybody for my behaviors, but that manifested itself. And as I got older, girls became more and more a part of my life and, more than one at a time. I would try to maintain multiple girlfriends. And when I was 19, I got married.
Oh my gosh. That tells you everything.
Yeah, and I just thought for sure, that was gonna fix it, right? Like, that was the fix all, but it wasn't, and so, I spent years, trying to handle these strong sexual impulses, and so in 2004 is when I started seminary and church, and really, Irene, looking back on that, I thought, "Well, that'll fix me, right? God will fix me. This is what I'll do. I'll give my life to the Lord, and that's going to fix everything." Well, needless to say, that didn't work either. And so
Right.
in 2017, I had an affair, one of many that ended my career. Now, in the
Because
mid,
the church found out and they expelled you or something?
well, I admitted it and I resigned. I think the church probably would have helped me get through it because I started the church and the people were such kind people. But it wasn't just the affair. My theology was unraveling. So the Southern Baptist theology, had been at that time, by then I had 2 degrees. I had an undergraduate degree in biblical theology and a master's degree in international community development. I
Wow.
was working in Uganda, trying to build communities in Uganda through sustainable economic growth. So I had a lot going on. But my theology was unraveling anyhow. I just didn't believe the way that I used to believe. And so I resigned. And from there, things did start to unravel. It's like I told people that when my paycheck was no longer tied to my theology could breathe. And as it started to breathe, it felt like I was losing something. It felt like that the God that I thought that I knew was not the God that I knew at all. Cause I mean, my thoughts were like, how could you let this happen to me? And, how could you let me get, cause in the midst of those affairs, it was really easy with my Southern Baptist upbringing to go, well, this must just be how God made me. And this is just, God has put this in front of me and I'm covered by grace and I'm going to heaven when I die. And this, nobody will find out because God's going to protect me and God knows I need this in order to survive. All the lies that we tell ourselves, especially addicts, the deals that we make. And if anybody's addicted to anything, you know what that feels like. And so that faith completely unraveled. And not long after that, I had found another job and I was just working a blue collar job. And in the midst of that job, I had another affair and lost another job. And
From having the affair?
yeah, because it was a lady who worked in the office. And she was the wife of one of my
You were
superiors.
surrounded by very judgmental people.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. so, so I lost that job. And that is when I went into wilderness therapy. I didn't go in. I was working as a field guide in wilderness therapy. And it was there, I was working 8 days on and 6 days off. So I was out in the woods with kids for 8 days and I'd come back home for 6. And it was there where I started exploring what nervous system regulation looks like. I met a man named Rob Gent, who was the chief clinical officer of the behavioral health company I worked for. And he came in one night and was teaching a training, and he started teaching how the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala disconnect from one another. And so when the body has actions that don't make rational sense, it's because we've lost control of our nervous system. And he started teaching about nervous system regulation. And it wasn't long after I met him that my children, they were adult children, but they found out about the last affair. And it just was not very pretty. They didn't want to really speak to me, have a lot to do with me, and I was planning my own suicide. I was laying on my left side in my bed at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I had a plan exactly how I was going to do it, and as a bit of a last ditch effort, I went to my computer and sent Rob Jen an email and said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but I am in a really bad place and I could sure use some help." And he emailed back almost immediately. And we set up a Zoom call and we got on that Zoom call and he introduced me to nervous system regulation and he taught me about cold water and breath work. And the next morning I started or actually that night I got in cold water and he explained it in a way that the rational brain is getting connected back to the nervous system. So the nervous system percepts danger when it's really not dangerous, but we've learned that it is. And for my case, that was pre-verbal trauma. And so it's just about getting your rational thoughts downloaded into your body so that you have rational actions, not irrational actions. And Irene, it was immediate for me. And I tell people all the time, it was like all the theology and all of the therapy and all of the 12-step work, because I was in recovery for sex addiction, like all of that stuff that was rolling around up here in the prefrontal cortex of my brain just downloaded into my body. Theology started making complete sense. And it was like, I had access to something bigger than myself that for the first time in my life was not binary. It was not black or white, in or out, heaven or hell. It was this beautiful universal energy that accepted and loved everything. And it doesn't have lines or boundaries. It's not bound by a leather book or a belief system or a doctrine. It just is what is, everything that is loving. And when I was able to get that down into my body, it changed the way I saw everything. And that's where I rebuilt my faith from, was that particular spot.
So now, how did that change your viewpoint of theology, of God, and all of that kind of thing? Because it's a very divergent. And I'm very curious about something else since you've opened the store. What causes sexual addiction? What did you learn that causes that?
Well, okay, so the two questions. So the thing that changed theologically is exactly what I said. I just stopped seeing God as this, we're right and everybody else is wrong.
Okay.
And if people ask me now, if they say, are you still a Christian? I'll say, well, sure. I don't believe in mainline evangelical Christianity, but I was raised in Georgia, for God's sake. I mean, we love Mama Jesus and grits down here. So it's like so that is still my framework. And even though I don't believe in things like the inerrancy of the Bible or the literal miracles and things of that nature, I still believe that Christianity is a way, and I subscribe to that, but I don't believe it's the only way. But once I learned how to regulate my nervous system, it is very much true because you start experiencing that thing that's larger than the rest of us. It's this divine energy that is so beautiful and so big and so all encompassing that there's no way to actually get your hands around it. It's certainly not write a freaking book about it, right? So it's just a huge energy. Sex addiction comes from two places. Some men will have just an addiction to the male orgasm, which is more powerful than heroin. We know that. It's an extremely powerful experience. And I don't expect women to understand the power of that feeling, but it is a very powerful feeling. Mine was the second version. Mine was connection. After being put up for adoption, I remember sitting in my therapist's office one day and we were talking about my sex addiction. And he said, Jason, I think it's worth mentioning that you spent your entire life trying to get back to the place the only place you probably ever felt at peace, and that was inside of your mother. And he said, so I think it's worth considering that your connection, that disconnection with your mother. And he pointed me toward books like Primal Wound and all these different things about adoption. That really helped me get my head around it. So sex addiction comes from 100% just the male orgasm and just wiring the brain, just like any other sex addiction. Although I would say that type of sex addiction is like an alcoholic walking around with a shot of vodka in their mouth that they can't swallow, because when you have a sex addiction, the junkie and the dealer live in the same body. And then the other one is just separation anxiety. And that's what I had, separation anxiety from birth, really.
And can you explain something else to me? What is with the ice? I never heard of that. The cold water therapy?
Yeah. So and I'll try to explain it in a way that'll go a little quicker. We have a body and we have a brain, and those things are connected by a nervous system. A central nervous system runs from our brain down to our spine, and our brain sends signals down to our body, and our body sends signals up to our brain. So when we say something like, I'm hungry, I'm angry, I'm sad, I am whatever we might say, those are things we feel in our body before we think them in our mind. We don't feel hungry in our brain. We feel hungry in our body. We don't feel lonely in our brain. We feel lonely in our body, in the center of our chest. When we cry, that emotion comes up from down here. Well, we know now through research of the vagus nerve and also neurological work inside the stomach has as much neurological networking as a cat's brain does. So some would even now say, neuroscientists would now say, we have more than one brain. We have this one, that we have one in our chest, we have one in our stomach, all connected to the vagus nerve. Now, so when I get into cold water, what I do is I set off the smoke alarm of my amygdala, which is the smoke alarm in the brain. The amygdala sits at the top of the brain stem. It is responsible for setting off alarms when we're in danger. Now, that's perceived danger. The amygdala does not work in language. The amygdala works in proprioception. It's allostatic load. So whatever my body perceives as danger, it sets off the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex goes offline, and we're all of a sudden living from the amygdala. Now, the way that worked in my life is if I felt any kind of threat of abandonment, I didn't have rational thought. I was working from the amygdala. The way I soothed that amygdala was through sex, flirtatious acts with women, relationship. But then I would be able to bring that prefrontal cortex online. And that's when I would say, I can't believe I did that. I don't want to do that. Why do I keep doing that? Those behaviors that make no sense that I kept doing are coming from the amygdala, not the rational thought. So when I get into cold water, and I do it every morning, 5:30 a.m., every morning in my life, I pop in the cold water tub. I set off that smoke alarm on purpose. I make it go off on purpose because the cold water sets it off clearly, because you can't live inside ice cold water.
Right.
But what I do while I sit there for 3 minutes, not 2, 3 minutes, I roll them out of fingers. I close that prefrontal cortex through my own decision. So I breathe. I talk to myself. I'm okay. I don't need to go anywhere. I'm fine. This is 3 minutes. I'm not going to die in 3 minutes. And I start training my brain how to in the midst of dysregulation to regulate itself by sitting with the dysregulation long enough to bring my prefrontal cortex back onto line. And it's all through life. They build a practice like I have in the morning, but then they have tools all day long that they use in the midst of anger, depression, anxiety, addiction, whatever you call it, you want to use in there. Well, I teach them how to regulate it, get control of it, and make the next right decision that's most loving back toward themselves.
How do you get the men who are, many of them, girls too, but men, many of them who are closed off, they're so blocked by this persona they've developed, which you also had developed a persona. How do you get them to open to all of this? Because a lot of them would probably say, that's crazy. What do you mean you're going to put me in cold water?
Well, usually, Irene, not to be too crass, but their shit has to come apart, the wheels have to come off. So most men that I work with, I would categorize them there. Like they've tried therapy, they've tried 12 steps, they've tried all manner of things, and they just cannot seem to get it together. And so that's when they come to me. And I have 2 or 3 therapists that I work with, and they love me because if I can get these men regulated, it's a 12-week program I use. If I get them regulated and then send them back to their therapist, the therapist will be like, my goodness, what did you do to this human being? Because now they don't just get more information in their head. They're learning how to get that information down into their body. Because the difference between a bad decision and a good decision is a freaking decision. And if I could teach men how to get just the tiniest bit of space between thought and action, and inside that space, they can grab that thought and go, wait a minute, that's not what I want to do. I've changed their lives. And a lot of people, like you said, people say, oh, this sounds ridiculous. Until they sit and think about it, it is 100% the most logical thing that you can ever. All we're doing is we are training the decision-making process. Most men make impulsive decisions, just like I did, thought to action, thought to action. I'm teaching them how to feel, think, grab, take a deep breath, and then go, is this really what I want to do? And they fail. But the failures, even in the failures, I tell my guys all the time, relapse is research. If you relapse, we just did a little research. Let's find out what went wrong. And are we using the tools? Because to just use the tools is awareness. And awareness is huge. I'm sorry, Irene, I could go on for hours.
No, but I want to know now. I want to know, what are those tools that you teach them?
Well, I teach them several things.
You're barking right up my tree. This stuff is, this is all about healing, and especially for men. Girls, take notes. So, for your man. So what kinds of tools do you provide them? And I love that you send them back to a therapist. So what you do, I love that. So you open them up.
Yep.
You get them to start to change their perceptions.
Yep.
And their choices. And then you send them back for more help. I think it's marvelous. So what are these tools you give them?
Yeah. And let me say this too, ladies, this will work for you. It's just, I am a man, and men most generally need to attack something. We struggle with just sitting and talking something to death. Eventually we need action. And so that's what the tools are. So Irene, I want you to think about your nervous system as a loop, because that's what it is. Their signals come from the body up, and their signals go from the brain down. And that loop is meant to be open. That means when the body sends a signal up, the brain is meant to go, is that true? Is that not true? Regulate itself and then speak back to the body. No, we're okay. And the other way around, the body's meant to send a signal up to the brain. That signal gets interrupted by trauma, and it brings men into a hypervigilant state or a hypovigilant state, one of the two. Either they're completely activated all the time, they're always wanting to fight, they're always wanting to run, they're always anxious, or they're deactivated all the time. They're emotionally unavailable, checked out, don't want to engage. That means the gate is closed on one side or the other. I help them open those gates, and here's how we do it. We build a practice that they can do. Some guys practice for an hour in the morning because they have time. Other guys practice for 15 minutes. But we're doing reps every morning of our lives. We do it every day. It's just like going to the gym. It's just like a healthy diet. We're adding in these reps, and we're training that nervous system to speak to the body and the body to speak to the nervous brain. Now, once they start doing these reps, we built an anchor. They have an
What
anchor
is the rep
point.
like? It's where they're thinking, or it's a
It's yoga, breath work, meditation, and cold water are the 4 pieces.
Wow, you're
And
getting guys into yoga. I think that's fantastic.
well, some of them. It's a lot of them really gravitate to the breath work and the cold water, but the yoga lets them feel the signals in the body, right? The breath work helps them control the autonomic nervous system. The meditation helps them catch and see the thought, and then the cold water helps them work on the impulses. When they take my 12-week program, I encourage them strongly to do some facet of all 4. So that's what they're doing in the morning. So they're building this anchor. And like I say, some of them only 15 minutes or so, but it's working. Now, throughout the day, I have a little screen, a lock screen that they can put on their phone. When they pick up their phone, it's the Sacred Grit logo, and it says, hands on head, take a step back and breathe. That's the number one tool. When a man feels that trigger coming, he puts his hands on his head. That's a sign of surrender. He takes a step back. He's retreating from his trigger, and he takes a deep breath. When he takes that deep breath, he takes it all the way in as far as he can. He holds it for 5 seconds. Then he takes another sip of air, holds that for 5 seconds, lets everything out, and then I have him set a 90-second timer and tell him, do not make any decisions for 90 seconds. If he gets to the end of that 90 seconds and he still feels dysregulated, I want him to splash cold water on his face. I want him to go for a walk. I want him to do whatever he needs to do inside of the next 5 minutes to change the direction of his decision-making process. Now, in the beginning, guys struggle with that because they also are just beginning the process. But what I see, and they have morning and evening forms that they fill out, is tracking data.
Oh, wow. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. So every day I get this spreadsheet download. It's giving me their data. How regulated was I? I have numbers on how confident I feel in making decisions for my life today. All these different, did you practice? What did you do? How long did you practice? What triggered you today? What's 3 things that went good today? What's one thing you wish you could do over today?
One thing that's coming to me as you're telling me all this, these are men who spend all their time taking care of everybody else, and you're helping them to take care of themselves.
100%, because they
don't have any concept of self-love for themselves.
And that's the basis of Sacred Grit is self-love. So my pillars are honesty, curiosity, and self-love. Honesty, where are you for real? And that doesn't mean confession. That means position. Curiosity, what can I do right now to get out of this? And self-love, can I love myself to do it? You're absolutely right, Irene. If I can get them to just love themselves even a little bit and they get a win or 2 under their belt, they'll take off and soar. It's amazing how it works.
So they change. Do you hear a lot from their spouses or from other people in the words, thank you, Jason. Oh my God, you changed our lives.
Yep. I'm not even married to the same man anymore. I hear that all the time. He's not the same man he used to be anymore.
And I like this one better. This version is much better, right?
Yeah, he's able to regulate himself, right? He's not living with all these triggers. He's able to actually hold his own discomfort.
That's amazing. Now you have a story about a man that really changed your perception about what you were doing. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I have a couple, but I'll share one with you in particular. I have a friend of mine, and Chuck started Adventures in Recovery with me, and we've been buddies for years. We worked in Uganda together. We've been all over the world together. And when we started Adventures in Recovery, it was mainly for addicts. And we were just kind of beta testing all this stuff because I knew it worked for me. I knew it worked for Chuck. I knew it had worked for 4 or 5 other guys. But we started working with just, drug court is what we call it here in Georgia, accountability court, men who have been forced into recovery. And we started using it with them, started seeing unbelievable success. And I started having people contact me. We started seeing just wild success. And so Chuck had a friend whose son got killed in an ATV accident. He was 16 years old. ATV flipped over on him. And this guy just could not get his life put back together. I mean, he was struggling. He was on medications. His marriage was about to fall apart, as most marriages do in that situation. And he's an attorney, and he has 4 different practices, 4 different locations. He was not able to work. He was having whole days where he was just shut down. And so Chuck decided that we would do a trip for grieving fathers. And so we took his name's Chad. We took Chad out, and then we took a couple of other guys that had also experienced loss in their life. And we just go out into the woods hiking. And so I start getting Chad's, his story, his lowdown, and just kind of hear what all he had went through. It was tragic. It's rough. And the second day, we always do our cold water immersion, our breath work, our yoga and meditation. And so I took him through all those things and, we went through the whole process and gave him the neuroscience behind it. And the next day, as he was driving home, he sent me a text and he said, I don't know what you did to me, but all I want to do is go home and put my life back together. And
Oh,
he said, I have found more peace than I've ever found. And so about a week or two later, we found ourselves in Chuck's basement in the floor. And I taught Chad the whole thing. I gave him all the neuroscience, how it works, and he has really taken off. Matter of fact, he's become one of my best friends. We head out into the woods this Friday, and he's bringing dads out with him now that have lost kids, and he's using the same methods. I had another young man who started smoking meth with his father when he was 13 years
oh
old.
my God. Oh my.
And he had struggled to stay sober. And at 33 years old, I started to work with him. And he sent me a text on his 34th birthday, and it said, "Thank you for the first sober birthday since I was 14 years
Oh
old."
my goodness.
And so we worked together. Well, now he's got a family, he's got children, he's got a job, he's got 4 years sober now, and he's still practicing on a regular basis. He's getting in the water, he's doing the breath work, he comes to men's retreats, he participates in Adventures in Recovery. So, yeah, these stories changed my perspective. But in the beginning, I experienced this just moment of, I don't know how else to describe it except rebirth. But I have noticed I was in a very specific place when that happened. So I tell the guys all the time, this is about consistency, not intensity. It's about doing it every single day. And those are the ones that experience the most out of it. I haven't had anybody relapse that was doing the program every single day.
You're teaching them to change the
Yeah.
mindsets,
Yeah.
which is the message that the body gets. You're teaching them, you're teaching them to stop themselves and say, wait a minute, I'm recognizing what's going on here. Let me switch to the other track.
Yeah.
Type
Is
of
this
thing,
really what I want to do? And then love themselves to do the thing that they want
right?
to
And
do.
which they've never given themselves permission. That's a foreign concept for them to love themselves. Right?
Yeah. 100%
I
it
would
is.
say
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
So tell us all about Adventures in Recovery. It's a nonprofit. It
Yep.
leads men through wilderness trips. It's a mentorship. It's a community. And then you have these self-love retreats. So
Yep.
let it rip. Tell us all about them.
Yeah, so Adventures in Recovery has become the free expression of what I do. And it's just a community of men, and anybody can join. They could just go to recoveryadventures.org. I think there's a link on there to sign up. I'll get back in touch with them. And what we do is we have these hiking trips twice a year that are meant to bring new men into the program. That's how they come in. They learn these practices, they get connected to the community. We have 2 Zoom calls every month. Those Zoom calls are practice specific. We always talk about one of the practices. We talk about nervous system regulation. It is an open conversation among the guys. We have an app called Circle. It's like a social media app. The guys can post on a message board. They can message one another. They mentor one another. All of this is absolutely free, Irene. We're going to Colorado this summer to climb
So they
313.
fly into Colorado. They meet you in Colorado and they take off these weeks in their lives and they do this.
Yep. And we're going to go climb 3 14,000-foot peaks. So that we're just doing community as men. And then the second level of that is sacred grit. So beyond that, we have retreats, which, men pay to come on. And that whole weekend revolves around honesty. Well, first thing is nervous system regulation, the basics of it. And then we talk about honesty, curiosity, and self-love. And they leave that weekend with every tool they need to move forward in their life. And from there, they can be a part of Adventures in Recovery. They mentor with the other men. They can talk to the other men. But I specifically beyond that encourage them, if they can, to do a 12-week program with me. It really gives them a start, a nice head start to be able to get regulated, to be able to then go to therapy if they need to unpack some of that trauma that some of them are holding. And then also do just one-on-one calls, just 1-hour sessions.
Well, I
for
love
guys
that
in
you
their
keep in
tune-up.
touch with them because you keep it fresh.
Yeah.
They don't, you prevent them falling back into their old ways of thinking, being, until it becomes a real part of their new identity.
It's not a magic pill, right? That's what I tell them. They've got to continue on the path. and continue to rewire that brain so that they can find the man that they want to be and the ability to be that man.
It's wonderful. And how has all of this that you're doing, what truths do you now live by that once felt impossible for that pastor and the Baptist church to believe?
That the most important thing I can do is make a decision to love myself, no matter how that looks to the rest of the world. And that sounds narcissistic, but I would argue it's the exact opposite. If I'm loving myself first and I am living by the truth that I know in the middle of my chest is how I need to live, that is the furthest thing from narcissism that there is. That's giving myself an internal regulation that I can in turn extend out to the rest of the world, because I don't need anything from the rest of the world, because I've already found everything I need inside of me. So I can come to the world getting everything I need from the world because I've already accessed it inside of myself. So the rest of the world, the community that I'm in, the how I interact with the spiritual community, I don't need them to be anything for me. I just need them to be who they are with me so that we can all be whole together. That's the biggest truth I've learned.
You're really inspiring them, and you're a wonderful role model for them. It's
Well,
terrific.
thank you.
Do you have a special promo to tell our listeners about?
Yeah, if they go to thesacredgrit.com, they can click on the link to book a call, and those are consultation calls. And normally I just do like 15 minutes for somebody, just kind of run through. But for your listeners, if they'll book that call and just put on there, I heard about you on, Grief and Rebirth podcast, I'll give them a free 30-minute consultation where I will actually help them design their own nervous system regulation process, and they could try it every morning for however long they want to. I'll share 2 or 3 videos with them that I've made. I'm building a course right now that will be on school, but I will share the videos with them explaining the breath work and the cold water, and they could go ahead and get a head start.
How about if a woman calls you, can she talk to you about her husband for 15
She
minutes?
sure can. She talked to me about her husband for 2 hours. I'll try to fix him for her. I tell people all the time. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do is rebuild men. We live in a world where men have really lost their way.
Yes.
They have really lost their way,
Well, they've
and they
lost
need
their
to find a
heart.
way.
They to me,
Yeah,
you could just feel free to disagree with me, but to me, they are not connected to their hearts. Everything
No.
is got to be a man, got to be really macho, got to take care of this, and
Yep.
That's a big problem.
That is a huge problem. It's not the way this works. Yeah.
Right? And you've said that healing helps a man become someone new because of his pain. Explain that to us, and what does that look like? And why do you say the healing path is sacred, which I could not agree with you more, but I'd like to hear it from Jason.
Well, here's the thing about pain. Pain is the strongest motivator to move us toward healing. The signals of our body that is painful is telling us that there's something in our body that needs attention. Our emotional pain is telling us that there's something in our soul that needs attention. And the path of healing is sacred because the only way that you can heal is by touching the sacred inside yourself. That altar that is in your body. Almost all spiritual traditions teach that our body is the temple. And, folks sometimes will say it's humanistic thinking or what's the other, stoicism, but it's not. Even if there is a grandfather in the sky somewhere sitting on a throne, throwing down lightning bolts, my only experience of that is inside of me. Jesus taught it. The Buddha taught it. The Bhagavad Gita teaches it. All of the spiritual traditions teach that thing that will heal us is inside of us. I'm working on a new book. The one that's about to come out is kind of a memoir. It comes out at the end of April, but I'm working on another one called A Man After God's Own Heart. And I was writing on it this morning. I'm just now starting to kind of put it together, but I put in there that there is this internal connection that we have to find in and of ourselves that will bring everything that we're looking for in and of ourselves. All other information outside of us that comes in is pointing us to that one thing. It's like the Buddhist principle, the finger that points at the moon is not the moon, it's just the finger that points to the moon. So all this information is not necessarily, even the information that I give out, it's not necessarily your truth. It's to point you toward your truth that already lives inside of you. And that is the sacred path. I tell people sacred grit is divine determination. It's having the grit and the determination to dig inside of your own soul and remove all that stuff that you piled on top of your true self and find God in the most unlikely place inside your body.
It's beautiful. And tell me, Jason, when a guy comes to you and he's full of regrets and resentment and judgment, and this one did this to him and this one did that to him, and I'll never forgive this one, and I'm going to let, how do you get them to let it go and to process that?
I teach them that the victim keeps their addiction alive. Listen, as long as that victim, as long as it is everybody else's fault, I have a reason to be the way that I am. I tell every one of my guys, if I stay the victim of my perpetrators, then I'm giving myself a reason to continue to have the decisions that I've had. But once I say, no, I'm forgiving that, I'm letting that go, I will no longer, and here's the way I frame it. You are giving control of your life over to everybody else. And men, real men, masculine energy is about taking control of our own internal soul. And so that's how I frame it. And sometimes they still struggle with it. I mean, there's some pretty heavy trauma out there. I'm sure you've heard of a lot of it yourself.
For sure.
Yeah.
And my own experiences too, of course.
Sure. But that's the starting point. And once again, the shit has to come apart. When that happens, they're pretty much open to a lot of things to try to get it put back together.
Oh, that's great. And tell me, you teach that joy is not something we chase, it's something we notice. What does that mean when it comes to healing and rebuilding a life?
Yeah, you have to choose to be happy. And I think we have created this dynamic in our world that happiness is some sort of something that happens to you, but happiness is something that you choose to be. And the ability to choose that happiness, I think it's Richard Rohr who said, we can't think ourselves into a new way of being, but we can be ourselves into a new way of thinking. And so a lot of times—
I love that. Say that again. That's a beautiful thing.
We can't think ourselves into a new way of being, but we can be ourselves into a new way of thinking. So if someone's just having a terrible day and they smile, just make themselves smile. You feel it all the way down into your body because your vagus nerve recognizes, oh, the body's smiling, I must be happy. You can choose happiness, or you can choose to be a victim. You could choose to be angry and bitter and mad and sad. And those things actually feel a little bit better because the nervous system is stuck in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So it feels better to you. You feel more regulated when you're there, but that's not the true you. The true you is happy, whole, healthy. And when you choose to be happy, whole, and healthy, you start living in that direction. You start changing the way you think. And then you get top down and bottom up regulation, and you're a whole human being. And that is true joy.
And that is true joy. That's wonderful. You know, Jason, instead of letting grief destroy you, you've allowed it to become a sacred teacher, transforming your story into one of profound healing and rebirth. I personally want to thank you for helping men to heal, transform, and evolve. God knows we need that. And for this inspiring conversation that aligns so deeply with the Spirit of Grief and Rebirth podcast. And from my heart, I wish you abundant blessings, truly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And as I like to say, to be continued.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. And to my cherished Grief and Rebirth podcast fans, stay tuned and see you again soon.
Until next time, many blessings.